We're speaking with South Australian Senator Alex Antic over in Canberra for the sitting week. How are you, Senator?
I'm well, thanks. Ricky, how are you?
Excellent, thank you. You've made some contributions in the first week back of the new Parliament. Just firstly, your general sense, have we got a lovely consensus, kumbaya, hold your hands together Parliament under Anthony Albanese?
Oh, look, it's a different feel over here, Ricky. I have to say, the halls of power here have a very, very different vibe, and I guess you would expect that with a change in government and a change in, in the makeup of the Parliament. But look, I don't know. There will be some things, of course, that'll be consensus-driven, but there are a few that are popping up that are not, and there's some ongoing issues, I think, that are really, really important, about all the things we've been talking about over the last 6 months.
Well, I imagine part of that narrative from the Albanese government was really about over on the green carpet in the other chamber is they're very close to falling into a minority if they don't keep the teal independents on side.
Yeah, it's an interesting dynamic. They are very much in that capacity. And look, things are unpredictable, as you know, in the best of times in Parliament, and with this injection of teal independents who are basically, kind of left-leaning in the for the majority part, I think that will throw a spanner in the works occasionally. So, look, I don't think it's going to be an easy ride for the government, and there are a lot of things I think that are going to prick people's interest when they see the rubber hit the road.
Well, when it comes to the teal independents, a big concern of theirs was climate change, and you've now got 12 Greens in the Senate. Is it possible to get a word in the Senate with 12 Greens there now about climate change?
It's becoming increasingly difficult. They were a louder voice than they were in numbers in any event. Now with 12 there, it's going to make life very interesting. But the crossbench is huge across the Parliament now, and it just goes to show. I think that the mystery out of all of this is I think people probably have voted Green with good intentions, thinking it's all about environment, when in actual fact, in my view, it's more about, new age Marxism, and that's the sort of stuff we see come out of their party room.
Well, that'd be interesting to unpack, but on the climate change front, this language about a climate emergency used by the Greens, you've had a bit of a crack at this language of emergency and taken us right back to Roman history during the previous sitting week.
Yeah, the history lesson's not always been historically my strength, but it did dawn on me how similar some of the things we're seeing now are to things we've seen in the past, all the way back to Rome, where we saw dictators who were given absolute power, some of the generals given absolute power for 6 months to lead the Republic in times of war. And what we saw through that era was those laws eventually becoming ingrained and just sticking. We saw that a little bit with the Homeland Security Act laws in the United States, which were done as a result of the September 11 attacks. A lot of that stuff has just stayed in American law, and I think we're seeing that here now. One of my great concerns during the COVID period back in April 2020 was that we would see a lot of these liberties just lost because politicians and bureaucracies, they don't like giving power back when they take it. And I think we're going to see that increasingly. So there's an importance, I think, in reminding people about history, because history, I think, is repeating itself all over the Western world when it comes to these power grabs.
Well, I'm disappointed, Senator, you didn't make reference to Star Wars. Emperor Palpatine said these emergency powers I will lay down when the crisis abates. It's even science fiction's tried to warn us of these things.
I had forgotten about that. You're absolutely right. That would have gone in very well. But usually pop culture references are more for the left of politics than me. But you're right. And of course, that was a parody of exactly what we were talking about the Roman times. I mean, that was effectively a sort of a Roman emperor speaking. And it's true, it's just a very good way to give power. And I think it was the great Australian historian, Dr. Stephen Chavera, who said, emergency is the language when democracy is no longer working. And I think we saw that all through COVID. I think, people have, unfortunately, through wanting to stay safe and wanting to, be, convenient with QR codes and all that sort of stuff, we're giving up more of our liberty than we realise.
Now, is it really the unpacking of those powers that were put in place a job for the states, or are there federal powers that were put in place on emergency grounds that still need to be unravelled?
Well, there's some through the Biosecurity Act, which is a Commonwealth piece of legislation, but mostly it's state-driven. In each state we had a varying but similar piece of legislation. In South Australia it was the Emergency Management Act, but now that's become amendments to the Public Health Act, which are trying to do similar but different things. It really bells the cat on what we're saying, though. This emergency declaration that was continually rolled over and over again with the Emergency Management Act really wasn't fit for purpose, in my view. That's my view. But now we're seeing it baked in there in the long term. A lot of these powers in the Public Health Act, the mandates continue, and they're given life through the Public Health Act. So we're seeing almost exactly what some of us predicted back in April of 2020, which is once bureaucracies have got control, they don't want to give it back, and they find ways for government to make them do it. People do strange things when they're afraid, and I think we've seen that very clearly through this period.
Well, this language of emergency is regularly used by the Greens in relation to the climate. They're trying to move in South Australia. Robert Sims, the former Green senator in the state parliament, now trying to move to ban gas connections to new homes, I think by 2030. Are we going to see this language of emergency deployed now to make interventions to save the planet?
Yeah, and I think we've been seeing it for a while now. It's just been creeping up on us. It's now going up a notch. It's exactly what's happening. I mean, you look at what's happening in Holland with the farmers over there who are protesting because the government there, in conjunction with the EU and presumably the World Economic Forum, have been saying you need to do more to protect the climate because we're in a climate emergency, according to them. And so they're banning the use of various fertilisers in order to play their part. Now, of course, what that's doing to the farmers is it's making it impossible for them to farm, and then presumably many of them will default on loans and end up having to leave their farming land. And this climate emergency stuff is straight in accordance with the United Nations 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, which really I think we're going to see roll out. And the point of what I was saying the other day in Parliament is people shouldn't ever be confused about the fact that this is going to come to Australia. We're seeing now the Labor government trying to brick in and bake in 43% climate emissions targets, and the Act as it's drafted will allow that target to be raised or lowered in the unlikely event it's lowered at the stroke of the minister's pen. So we're seeing this power grab both in the emergency powers for COVID, but also with this nonsense that is the so-called climate emergency. South Australian state government declared one a month or so ago with no evidence. And, I think this is an increasing problem. We're going to see this roll out. And look, the net effect is bad. But, if there's no farmers, there's no food.
Yep, well, that's a good point, and a point those Dutch farmers have been making. Senator, thanks for joining us for a quick moment of time while you go wait to get back into the Senate for another sitting. Thanks again for joining us today.
Thanks, Ricky. Appreciate it.